get into questions of allocations of funds and budgets between center and state. I understand that this is something we seem to have inherited from the British, because there too, their courts have taken the view that we should not be entering, the courts should not be entering financial arrangements that the government of the day chooses to make. So they say, for example, we cannot decide what percentage should be allocated to health, what percentage to education. This is for Parliament to decide. While that is understandable, in my opinion, issues such as finances which impact relations between center and state should be justiciable issues. The kind of scrutiny that the Election Commission of India has been subjected to under our laws, that kind of scrutiny the Finance Commission has not been subjected to in India and by our courts. This is, of course, something that we need to revisit. We need to ponder on this. Why is it that while the Election Commission of India, though it has now become non-performing for political reasons, was in any event subjected to very intense scrutiny by our courts and made in some minimal sense accountable to the people? Similar scrutiny, as I said, has not taken place insofar as the Finance Commission is concerned. In the UK, though I have not studied this matter carefully, it is changing. And although the courts will now not get into matters of allocation, they do actually entertain petitions which ask the government to justify why a particular grant has been made in a particular way. So although the courts will not decide what the grants should be, they are willing to scrutinize the reasons why certain grants have been made in the manner they have when a citizen approaches the court. So these kinds of issues have been reaching the courts in other countries, but they have not yet reached the courts in India. Having said this, I'll just mention a few articles of the Constitution which actually are relevant to today's discussion. We all know that states were organized in India on linguistic basis by the States Reorganization Act following the Commission report. That continues to be true till today. We know that legislative power is distributed between the center and the states under Article 256 of the Constitution of India. Sorry, not 256. 256 basically says, that's 256.
Would you like to sit and speak?
No, it's okay. 256 basically requires states to exercise their power in consonance with laws made by Parliament. Dr. Hamid Ansari has said that this is a much abused and misused provision of the Constitution. We have discussed already how the powers under 356 have been misused. We have also discussed how Article 254 requires inconsistency between laws of states and center to be avoided, and where Parliament has the power to legislate, and all of you know that it has power to legislate on concurrent subjects. This means that on a concurrent subject where the state and the center has legislated, the parliamentary law will prevail. Examples were given here of the Motor Vehicles Act and the Land Acquisition Act. It is Article 263 which sets up an interstate council. I'm told that the council has not met very often, all of 12 times in the last few years, and the proceedings of the interstate council are kept confidential. So we really don't know what goes on in interstate councils. And that, of course, brings us to the Finance Commission, Article 280, and the Constitution itself lays down very, very clearly what the functions of the Finance Commission are. So while issuing the notification of 2017, setting up the Finance Commission, basically that notification apart from setting out the names of the members, reproduces the provisions of 280 of the Constitution of India. Now we are told that there is an amendment which has been made under which there is to be a separate consideration for defense. I come back to the courts. Some jurists have taken the view that the courts have overstepped their limits where they are not supposed to overstep limits. I actually had a conversation with a lawyer who also happens to be an economist, and I asked him what he thought the role of the court has been in monitoring or guiding the economy of this country. And he said to me that in his opinion, the Supreme Court of India has contributed to the economic decline of this country. He had his own reasons, which I do intend to put on record very soon. I have it all written down. In fact, I have it in a videoed interview. I choose not to disclose the name until such time as I put it on record. But this was the evaluation of one of the senior-most lawyers in this country who represents corporate houses. Now, it is possible to argue that he's articulating a corporate point of view. But if he's articulating a corporate point of view, and if this is the view of the corporate sector of the country, that the courts have contributed to the decline of the economy of this country, I think we all need to sit up and think about this and decide what we want to do about it. Examples can be multiplied. What happened in the 2G case? Where exactly are we after that? Are we any better? What has happened on the issue of forest rights? Are we any better? In fact, my question also was, I'll conclude it. I'll finish in 2 minutes.
1 second.
I'll finish. Yeah. Yeah, he's asked me to finish this one. I have been asked to continue and conclude, which I will do in a couple of minutes. I would like to set before you the examples of where I, speaking as a secular Democrat, believe that the courts have gone wrong when it comes to handling the economy of this country. It happened over the 2G case. I do not have to give you the details. It's a much written about, much spoken issue. And all of you know that it ended in an acquittal. But the intervening 4 or 5 years, what happened to the economy of this country is something that you need to talk about. Let's look at the example of the Godavarman case. Forest, conservation of forests in this country. The Supreme Court of India has been dealing with that case for the last 23 years. 23 years. I would like somebody to do some research on whether forest cover in this country has increased over the last 23 years. Because that, at the end of the day, was the purpose of that case. We need to conserve our forests. Are we any better off with the Forest Conservation Act than we were 23 years ago? Let's look at the rights of Adivasis. Today, there is litigation in the Supreme Court saying that they are all encroachers and that they should be removed from their encroachment. This has been done in the name of conservation of forests and of the environment. It is being seriously argued in court that the center has no right to legislate the Forest Conservation Act because it is a concurrent subject, it is a state subject. And therefore, let's not have the Forest Conservation Act. So, I've given you 4 or 5 examples of where the courts have gone wrong in the way in which they have dealt with the economy. So I would like to actually conclude my speech. There's a lot to say and not enough time to say it, by saying that we need to critically look at the method under which the Finance Commission functions. We need to take some of these issues to the Supreme Court, though of course seriously I would not recommend it at this point of time, because I think something strange is happening in court these days, which again I can't articulate over here. I have not quite made up my mind what it is. But I'll end by again quoting from Dr. Hamid Ansari. He said that the principles that should govern the functioning of federalism are democracy, justness, fairness, and efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this important legal input, Indira J. Singh ji. I mean, there were new aspects that have been brought out. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. May I, instead of welcoming Dr. Manmohan Singh, our former Prime Minister, may I request all of you to welcome him by giving him a big hand.
Yes, it's a great pleasure that Dr. Manmohan Singh is here, and I think he'll be the most competent to speak on this, because I don't think there's any other person in India who served as Secretary Finance, Advisor, Economic Advisor, Finance Secretary, Governor of the Reserve Bank of India, Finance Minister, and then the Prime Minister, and Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission at one point of time. And since Indira J. Singh ji talked about the Interstate Council, if I'm not wrong, sir, I think the initial conception was the Planning Commission would be the permanent secretariat of the Interstate Council. And that is how initially it was conceived of, which never, of course, happened. But anyway, leave that apart. So it's a great pleasure to ask Dr. Manmohan Singh to speak to all of us and give us the advice that he usually does. He said no.
Dear friends, I'm very grateful to the organizers of this seminar inviting me to sit through some of the sessions of this very important seminar, which is looking into the terms of reference of the Finance Commission. Finance Commission is a constitutionally appropriated body. Its significance is very great because it derives its mandate from the Constitution of India. And I am going to speak only on the limited subject that what is the significance of additional terms of reference which have been given to the Commission at this fag end of its sessions. I have been told that the Commission is going to submit its report by 30th of November, and it is towards the end of July that the government gave additional terms of reference with regard to the creation of separate funds for defense and internal security. Defense, of course, is the prerogative of the central government. It is in the union list. Internal security is also largely in the list of states subject, though center also plays a role in fostering a sense of internal security in our country. Now the question is, what should the Commission do? The Commission I'm told once upon a time the Ninth Finance Commission took the view that it will be guided by the constitutional mandate and will do a fair distribution of taxes regardless of what the government of the day may say. Now, I don't know whether this commission is going to adopt that line of thought, but if sense of security, internal security as well as defense, are subjects which are of great national importance, and the best course would have been that for the central government, if it wants to tinker with the terms of reference, to go back to the Chief Minister's Conference, which meets now under the auspices of the Niti Aayog. Otherwise, there will be a strong feeling that the government is trying to rob the states of their due resource allotment, and that is not good for the federal polity of our country and the cooperative federalism that we all swear by these days. So I would respectfully request the authorities to still take this view that they will go by the advice of the chief ministers if there are any controversies with regard to additional terms of reference of the commission. Otherwise, there is no doubt in my mind that the commission should take a broader view of its mandate, and in allocating resources, both the center and the states, it must look at what are the requirements of our polity at this moment of time. There are certain basic issues like allocations for health, education, and other important subjects, environment protection, where all states have a legitimate interest, and what should be done by the government is to evolve a broad national consensus in dealing with all these issues. Otherwise, there would be bickerings, there would be dissatisfaction, and this is not good for the federal polity of our country. Cooperative federalism demands give and take, and therefore it is very important that the central government should take initiative to consult states as often as necessary to carry them along rather than imposing its views on a reluctant finance commission. That's all that I wanted to say. I am not competent to comment on other aspects which are before the finance commission, but I do believe that this moment of time at this fag end of the commission's work, it is rather odd for the government to come up with additional terms of reference, and particularly because most state governments have already gone to the commission setting out their resource requirement, and the commission would certainly have taken note of that. And now to impose another terms of reference on the commission would complicate its work, and that certainly is not good for the federal polity and cooperative federalism that we all desire should flourish in our country. Beyond that, I have nothing much to say, but I do wish this conference all Godspeed. You are engaged in a very important exercise, and I sincerely hope that your work, your deliberations would help to strengthen the broad national consensus on issues of cooperative federalism, particularly as they operate to the approach of the country with regard to the Finance Commission. The Finance Commission, as I said, is a constitutionally mandated body. Its report goes to the Ministry of Finance. The Ministry of Finance then goes to the Cabinet, and therefore the government of the day can take a view that whatever the mandate of Parliament, the government would abide by that rather than imposing unilaterally its views on the reluctant state governments. With these words, I once again thank you for inviting me to this important meeting.
Thank you, sir, for those inspiring and insightful remarks. May I now request Dr. Manmohan Singh to release a book written by the person who conceived this idea of this conference, Dr. Thomas Isaac, Kerala's Honorable Finance Minister, jointly with R. Mohan and Lekha Chakravarti. The book is titled The Challenges to Indian Fiscal Federalism. The book is being distributed to all the participants here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manmohan Singh. I would thank all the participants in this inaugural session of this important seminar. And all of them have made contributions which are larger than the issue that is specifically pointed out here, because it's part of the overall attacks on the secular democratic foundations, which include federalism as a very important pillar. So many aspects of these have come, including the legal aspect that Madam Indrajit Singh had brought before us. And I thank all the participants, and particularly Dr. Manmohan Singh. As I said, while inviting him to speak, he was the most competent authority in India today, and to speak on this subject. And thank you very much, sir, for having come and grace the occasion. So with this, we come to the close of this inaugural session. So thanks for this very large participation. I'm afraid next time the Kerala Finance Minister organizes something like this, he engages a bigger hall so that people need not stand most of the time. So thank you very much for all of you who participated. Thank you.
Friends, I think you will agree with me that it was a wonderful session which really took us to the current trajectory and the plight of Indian federalism. And let us not hope that it will not get into any elusive federalism. Let us break for a tea for just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. I want to know how efficient you are going in terms of drinking tea in fast. Only 5 minutes. After that, tea will be closed. We are going to be back. Please, 5 minutes tea. Thank you very much. Let's give a big hand to the last session for their wonderful contribution.